Welcome, everyone. We're back with another episode of Your Spiritual Journey, and this is the place and the space where we get into depth about things that really matter. My guest today is Kevin May, and Kevin's just out there doing so much. I just feel that it's hard to corral such a personality, but we'll try. So Kevin had the courage to be born into the period of transition, and that's the period we're all in, and the courage to advance it in the way that you do, Kevin. I'll tell you, this sense of living your best life is, I don't know, it's infectious. And this shirt says it all. Everything is energy. I just love it. So I'm not going to give a lot of your background because I'm going to let you do that. So I'm going to turn the mic over to you. I may interrupt you once in a while, but just give us your story from childhood to date, if you would.
All right. Well, thank you for having me here, Bob. This is awesome. And happy Wednesday, or whatever day you're listening or watching this, to all of you listeners, viewers out there. So, yeah, I was born here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, went to Alderdice High School. All of my schools were in the kind of East End area, and loved to play sports growing up, loved to run. I was a track runner, played soccer, ran cross country my senior year of high school. And growing up, I was never really into spirituality. My parents, although they had a spiritual framework, they made the conscious decision to not inflict it on us, so to speak. And so, we had some very basic things we would say before meals, but I never had a concept of God really growing up. I never had a concept of some higher force governing my life. It was just kind of me and the world, that was it. And I believe in a higher perspective that caused me to find my own meaning and go on my own quest, because I was never really given a program to follow. I had to figure it out for myself. And so my junior year of high school, I developed chronic pain, and it's kind of a funny story. We went to visit my grandparents for Thanksgiving, and for the first time ever, I flew a kite with my grandpa, like a really serious kite that you have to crank really hard with your hands. So for probably an hour, I was, cranking this kite. It's like 300 feet in the sky. The wind's carrying it. It's like a really strong effort to hold this thing. And then I had to crank it all the way back in. And around this time, I was also really into racquetball. And so when I got back from Thanksgiving, I noticed that my wrists were really hurting when I was playing racquetball. And eventually, the pain in my wrist was so bad that I had to stop playing racquetball, which is a bummer for me because I really loved it. And then a few weeks later, it was just this wrist pain continued really bad. So my parents got me a doctor's appointment, went and saw a doctor. They were like, we're not really sure what it is, but we'll give you a wrist brace to maybe that'll help out with it. And it just kept getting worse and worse until it was to the point where I couldn't even write in school. It was so uncomfortable, and it was really getting me down. And we saw a couple more doctors. They would see me for like 5 minutes, and I just felt like they didn't care. They didn't understand what was going on. And it really, bothered me that I had to deal with this chronic pain. And eventually we went to a doctor who thought that maybe it was some sort of mind-body connection that was happening. It wasn't just a physical issue, but there was some sort of psychosomatic, psychological, or emotional aspect. And he said, we've actually sent people to this inpatient program at Children's Hospital. There's only a few the Children's Institute over in Squirrel Hill. They said there's only a few in the whole country places that will take people with chronic pain. And it just so happens that you live a few blocks from one, literally in Squirrel Hill. And so sure enough, I signed up for this program. It was 3 weeks of intensive physical therapy. I lived at this place called the Children's Institute for 3 weeks. Every single day we'd wake up, we'd have about 6 hours throughout the day of intensive stretching, physical therapy, all kinds of jumping jacks, X, Y, and Z. And in addition to that, we'd have psychologist appointments, and they would help us to learn about biofeedback and regulating our emotions and things like that. And for the first time ever, I did a guided meditation with this psychologist, and she, brought me in this room with very dim lights, and she said, we're going to do a guided meditation, and I'm going to help you relax each part of your body one by one. And so she put on some tranquil music, and one by one she said, flex all the muscles in your toes and then relax and all this stuff. And it was like one by one I felt this tension just dissolving from my body. And after 20 minutes, I was in such a state of peace. I was completely shocked, and I didn't feel any pain in my body, and I was just blown away that I could change my state of being so profoundly through meditation. And so that was a real light bulb moment for me. And so I continued with this 3-week program, and the pain would flare up and then it would go back down and flare up. But at the end of the 3 weeks, I felt considerably better, and it felt like I had gotten my life back to not have this horrible pain that was not only in my wrist but in my knees at this point. And so I can just remember getting out of this Children's Institute, and it was just about to be summer, and I was just so excited and happy to, have gratitude for life again. And so that was around the exact same time I got a laptop, and so I just began learning about meditation, anything to do with altered states of consciousness. I was just super fascinated about that. And it put me on this quest of knowledge that I've been continuing on. This was in 2007 or 2008. And, it's been about 15 years now. There's many other chapters to the story, but that was really a pivotal experience of understanding more of the mind-body connection, understanding how our emotions might play a role in physical ailments, and also the power of meditation to, heal these things.
Yeah. So that's kind of early to be discovering meditation and its benefits and the power of it.
Yeah.
So I know that in having read your book, and this book is pretty amazing. So unlocking your superpowers. As I read this, I thought, this is really a memoir. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's also a how-to.
Yeah.
And it's very useful, I guess. When I say useful, I've read probably a lot of the same books that you have in terms of getting background and experience of these things, but you're able to take the theoretical and make practical applications that make so much sense to me. So I know that there was another experience that you had, a bicycle auto experience. So could you talk a little bit about that and where that took you?
Sure. So the bike trip was a huge rite of passage for me. I think that in our society nowadays, a lot of young people don't get to experience real rites of passage where there's this big quest that you go on that's challenging and causes you to really tap into your courage and face the unknown. And so when I was a freshman at Penn State University, I met these bicyclists that were part of this group called the Happy Thursday bike ride, where every Thursday about 50 different bicyclists and unicyclists and skateboarders. They would meet up at this certain place at like 6 p.m. and they just bike around campus for an hour, wishing everyone a happy Thursday, ringing bells, honking horns. It was like this brigade of joy. And I became friends with these people that would do this ride, and it was just such a cool thing to me. And so I love to ride my bike, and as I hung out with them more, a few of the key organizers were saying, when we graduate, they were a few years older than me. They said, when we graduate, we're going to go on a bike trip across America, and we're just going to, do it ourselves and not follow any big guidelines. We're just going to blaze our own trail. I was like, that sounds freaking amazing. But there's no way, it didn't even cross my mind really that I would be a part of this trip. But these became some of my best friends. I didn't hang out with many people that were also freshmen. I just gravitated towards these people that felt like kindred spirits. And so I would hang out with them. And another synchronicity was a huge wake-up book for me was called Ishmael by Daniel Quinn. That book really woke me up big time. And before I read Ishmael, I pretty much hated reading. I would read the Spark Notes on every book in high school. But when I read Ishmael, it completely changed my life. And so anyway, Ishmael became basically my Bible. And then when I met these Happy Thursday people, the main leader, his name's Will, he told me we should get in contact. He writes down his email address. His email address was psulever@gmail or something like that. And I was like, lever? That's like one of the key terms from the book Ishmael. I wonder if he's read Ishmael. And sure enough, at the next meeting, I asked him, he's like, dude, you've read Ishmael? I'm like, yeah, it's the greatest book. He's like, one of my best friends, we met because we both read Ishmael. He found me on some weird forum about it. And so me, Will, and Charlie all bonded over having read this book Ishmael, and it changed our lives. And so Will and Charlie were planning to go on this bike trip, and they became like my best friends. They were both into meditation. We were hanging out all the time. We started having these gatherings on the big lawn at Penn State where we do like yoga and give out free books and free food. And it was just like paradise to me, kind of creating this alternate way of living in society. And so we were hanging out all the time, and they were like, we need to start training for this bike trip. So they would do these, 30-mile bike trips. And I was like, well, I'll at least come with you guys on the training trips. That won't hurt anything. But somehow after a while, I was like, I think I just need to go on this bike trip. And so I knew that my parents would flip out if I decided to take a year off, because they were planning to go on as long as it needed. And so it was starting the summer, but I figured I needed to take a year off from college to do this bike trip. So sure enough, I went to whatever building I had to go to. I signed the paperwork to say I'm taking a year off from college without telling my parents. And about 2 weeks before I needed to leave for this trip, I broke the news to them, and they completely lost their minds. They could not fathom that I just did this without asking them. And as it turned out, a few days passed. I think they talked to some of my aunts and uncles, and that helped calm them down, because some of my cousins have done weird stuff. So anyways, they were like, all right, you're going to go on this bike trip. We're just going to let you do it. I think they were a little skeptical how far we would get. Our plan was to go fully across America. And sure enough, in early June of 2010, we started from the East Coast, and we made our way on the C&O Canal Trail all the way over to Pittsburgh. We were here in July, and then we just started going west,
Where did you start?
Well, the official cruise started in Woodland Beach, Delaware. I was actually on a trip with Penn State visiting indigenous people in Minnesota, so I had to miss the first 5 days of the bike trip. But I joined up with them in, I think, near Philadelphia. So they started in the ocean on Woodland Beach, Delaware. I joined them 5 days later. And they had already been through so many things in the first 5 days. I was like, this is going to be a crazy trip. And So yeah, we continued from Pittsburgh. We went through all the I states: Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, Idaho. A lot of I states, a lot of corn and soybeans. But we met so many amazing people, and we were exploring sustainable living. So we visited all different types of eco villages, places that were growing their own food, using solar panels, all kinds of alternative living. And in college, I was studying a lot of the problems of the world, climate change, and all these different deforestation. And it felt like in college, all we were doing was crunching the numbers of how screwed up everything is. Like, oh, we have this many problems. And on the bike trip, it was like the complete opposite. It was just people living the solutions, putting the solutions into play every single day. And I was like, this is what we need to be doing. Why the heck are we sitting there studying about, this, and this when the solutions are available and there's people putting them into play? So it was really like an activation for me, visiting all these places that were demonstrating the solutions. And it just fired me up. And that's when I began making YouTube videos, was in 2010. So we made videos the whole bike trip. I was holding up my little camera saying, look at this eco village. All these videos are still online. Our group was called the Cultural Recyclists. And, because the premise, throwing back to the book Ishmael, is that our culture is like the water that we swim in. And, it's this collective belief system of how reality works. And if we can shift the cultural norms to a new set of beliefs and a new way of operating, then we can change the world. And so with this cultural recyclist things, we was play on words, obviously, with cyclist, but it was like, what ways can we recycle ancient ways of living and create a culture that's more sustainable and more holistic? So anyway, if you want to check out the videos, search Cultural Recyclists on YouTube. We've done a lot of strange things. So anyways, we continue this quest. We make it all the way through Yellowstone. It was pretty crazy. At Yellowstone, if you get in the gate before 5 a.m., then you get in free. So we camped out right next to the gate. Slept. We squeezed we also picked up riders. There's other people bike touring. So random people, not random, but other cyclists joined up with us. So when we entered the Yellowstone, I think we had 12 people all squeezed into this tiny one-room hotel right next to the gate. And then we woke up at 4 a.m. and started bicycling so that we could get into Yellowstone for free. And then for literally 3 hours straight, it was uphill bicycling for 3 hours straight. And at the bottom, it wasn't that cold, but by the time we got to the top, it was snowing. We're in Yellowstone. It's this snowstorm. We haven't encountered snow the whole trip. It was September 1st, mind you. And it was pretty freezing cold at Yellowstone. But we made it through, as we always do. And that was a pretty great part of the trip. And eventually we made it over to Portland, made it to the Pacific Ocean, which was pretty phenomenal to have gone ocean to ocean. And a few of us put our bikes in the water, actually. And so the trip continued. Our goal was to get to San Francisco, and 150 miles north of San Francisco, very close to the finish line. It's a regular day, just cruising down the Pacific Coastal Highway. And I think I was probably beatboxing, as we were talking to earlier. I was often beatboxing to enjoy, pass the time while biking. And out of nowhere, I just got whacked by a car that was going probably 55 miles an hour. And one part of the trip that was, sustainability. So we had these yellow Tidy Cat kitty litter buckets to hold all of our gear. And so these were strapped to the back of my bike. And so the car hit my back left kitty litter bucket, and the bucket exploded and took the brunt of the impact. I flew off to the side, and my bike continued to fly 60 feet down the highway. So that could have been me.
Yeah.
The joke is this kitty litter bucket literally saved my life.
Literally.
And But the thing was, I hit the ground and I instantly felt, holy shit, I'm dying. I'm dead. This is it. Like, I didn't expect to die so young, but I guess I just have to accept it. And so I really just melted into this peaceful white light. It felt like this ocean of peace and tranquility. And I just laid there expecting to die, whatever's supposed to happen when you die. And eventually I kind of opened my eyes and I looked down and I was still here, and I was like, whoa, maybe I'm actually going to survive. I looked down at my toes. I felt basically paralyzed, but I looked at my toes and I noticed I could still feel my toes. I was like, all right, this is a good sign.
Yeah.
And I was very into meditation at this point. You know, my friends would always tease me on the bike trip because it was like, Kevin's always stopping to meditate. Every time we'd stop, I'd just be in meditation. They'd be like, we need to get going. And so that was a running joke. But anyways, I was like, just gonna send good energy throughout my body and visualize the best possible outcome. That was my first thought. And so my friends ran over. Everything felt like it was in slow motion. You know, my friend Charlie ran up to me and he said he was just in shock. And I was like, this is it. Like, this was actually before I realized I was going to survive. But I said, tell everyone I love them and put all my money into buying Eckhart Tolle books for all my friends. That was my dying wish because I was so obsessed with Eckhart Tolle's books. That was the only thing that made sense to me in that moment. So anyway, after I realized I was going to make it, you know, my friends came over and I just was like, hey, send me good energy. I'm going to be fine. We're going to make it through this. And the woman who was driving the car that hit me, she ran over. She was totally freaking out. And there's this notorious picture on Facebook of her like in tears freaking out and I'm on the ground smiling. And, you know, she eventually calmed down and she ended up coming to visit me a few days later when I was recovering and just, you know, apologize. And I was just like, hey, I'm happy to be alive. No big deal. I'm not going to press charges or anything. It turned out I had no broken bones. My helmet was cracked in half, so that likely also saved my life. But it was pretty miraculous to not have any broken bones getting hit by a car going 55 miles an hour. So I did have to get my knee stitched up. And the second part of it was when I got to the hospital, I told the doctors, you need to let me meditate for 30 minutes before I get surgery. And so I literally sat there and meditated before they stitched up my knee. But anyway, when I did end up getting the surgery, my friends came in and they were gathered around me as I was recovering, and they started channeling healing energy, giving Reiki to my body. And it was at that point when the emotional magnitude of what happened finally hit me. And that was the first time I cried the whole time. It like finally caught up with me. I was like, holy shit, I almost died. And I started crying and my whole body started vibrating. And I now believe that this was a Kundalini awakening experience because my whole body started vibrating so intensely that it became like rigor mortis. It was like rock solid. And it felt like my consciousness was kind of shot out of my body into outer space, and I was looking down at Earth, and I just felt complete, total compassion for everyone on Earth. It was just like this visceral understanding that everyone is just doing the best they can, and that we've all been hurt in these certain ways, and that anyone that's hurting other people is just somehow acting out the hurt that they've received. And so it's just this overwhelming sense of compassion and this insight that we really just need to change the stories that we tell ourselves and the stories that we operate as a society so that we can raise our consciousness and escape these cycles. So that lasted about 10 minutes of that intense vibrating and crying, and eventually I kind of calmed myself back down. But that was, I believe, the beginning of an ongoing Kundalini awakening process, which has taken me in all different directions over the past 13 years.
Yeah. Yeah, that's, you know, they say that these kinds of traumatic experiences are opportunities for that kind of expansion. Uh, I'm a Reiki practitioner myself, and tears are often a result of a Reiki experience when there's that release. But your release wasn't just through your eyes. Then your release is, going up there and really gaining an understanding that wasn't there before. And it's beyond understanding. I guess it's a knowing.
Yeah.
So, just wow. That's amazing. So that was 13 years ago, you're saying?
Yeah, 2010.
So with that understanding, with that knowing then, how has that affected what you've done since then?
Yeah, it's a good question. So when I was recovering from this bike accident, that's when I really dedicated myself to yoga. So I was in San Francisco. We crossed the Golden Gate Bridge. I met my friends there, and I walked across the Golden Gate Bridge with them. I was on crutches, but I did get to cross it, which was very significant.
That's a long walk on crutches.
Yeah, it was a solid journey, but I was dedicated. And so we were in San Francisco for about 2 weeks at the end of the bike trip, figuring out what's next. And they had this place called Yoga to the People, and it was a donation-based yoga class that people would go to by the hunt. Like, there was usually about 100 people there. It was a massive warehouse in San Francisco, and so I was going there almost every day, and that helped me rehabilitate my knee. And so eventually I decided it's time to go back to Pittsburgh, so I took a Amtrak train all the way across the country back to Pittsburgh. And when I got back to Pittsburgh, I was just so lit up from this literally 6-month rite of passage that I had been on. It took us 6 months to do the whole thing. And so I was like, I got to bring whatever snippet of this back to Pittsburgh that I can and help get this sort of energy and cool things going in Pittsburgh. And so I started gathering with different friends that were into the same kind of stuff. And it was in about February of 2011 that I had this vision for unifying as many people as possible from all the nooks and crannies of Pittsburgh and coming together in a circle, joining hands as a peaceful gathering to just honor ourselves in that beingness that I felt like I experienced when I was in the hospital of, underneath all the stories and all the drama and everything, we're these beautiful human beings before we do anything. And so I thought, what if we all came together and joined hands and we just be for a minute? And that was really my vision. And so I shared it with some friends, and they were very into it and some of them had been thinking of a similar gathering of all these different circles that happen in Pittsburgh. And so we began planning, and the name came through the collective genius to call it the Peaceful Gathering of Hands, based on PGH, the acronym for Pittsburgh. And so we said, we're going to create the biggest peace gathering in Pittsburgh history, to our knowledge at least. And so we did it completely grassroots. We didn't have any corporate sponsors. We didn't have any fancy commercials or anything, but we just made our own flyers and said, hey, on this date, it was May 21st, 2011, everyone just come to Schenley Oval and we're going to have an awesome peace gathering. And the momentum just kept organically building, and sure enough, I think it possibly was the largest peace gathering in Pittsburgh history, our very first one. Even though we've done it 10 years in a row, the very first one was the biggest. And that's actually the cover of my book, is one of the biggest circles where we have over 100 people gathered there at Schenley Park. And so, what I realized on the bike trip was that when you get people of common interest together, the magic inevitably happens. You don't have to have too much structure or too much, programming. When you get enough awesome people together that are into the same kind of stuff, it naturally just cross-pollinates. And so that's what happened at this first event. All these new friendships made, all these new connections happened. And so we just kept that momentum growing. And so over the years, we had it every year from 2011 to 2019 in a live setting. And then in 2020, we had it on Zoom. For the last 2 years, we've taken a break, but we're actually bringing it back this May. So May 13th. If you're listening to this before May 13th, 2023, come join us in Schenley Park at Schenley Oval, right by the ice skating rink. And so, building community has been a key part of my journey after this bike trip and after these spiritual experiences, because, the personal quest is very important. And I do believe there's got to be a balance between the inner work and the outer work. That's been a big lesson I've learned. You can't be totally externally focused, but you also can't be totally internally focused. You got to find this nice balance. And so, the community events have been huge, and I've been a part of many other community events. But the Peaceful Gathering of Hands in particular has been very special.
Yeah. Well, as I recall, speaking of events, you've also participated in Burning Man. I do have some friends who have done Burning Man. It's sort of a once-in-a-lifetime experience, but
Sure.
You've done it a couple times.
Yes.
And I know that's been quite an experience for you. For those in the audience who don't know what Burning Man is, maybe you can enlighten us.
Sure. So yes, Burning Man is a complete alien planet experience that somehow also happens on Earth. It's a gathering of approximately 70,000 people in the middle of the desert for 1 week. People come there, set up these incredible camps and installations in the middle of a completely empty desert. This entire city forms. It's called Black Rock City. And for 1 week, it's just this complete alternate reality experience with, cars. They literally have pirate ships going around on wheels, like shooting fire, and people dancing in the most insane outfits you could possibly imagine. It literally feels like it stretches your imagination of what's possible, 20 feet in both directions. You're just like, what is even happening? And so I first read about this Burning Man festival in a book called Breaking Open the Head by Daniel Pinchbeck, which is quite an interesting book. And that it sparked something in me, and I was like, man, I got to put that on my bucket list to go to Burning Man. And so when I got back from the bike trip, I did take a full year off from college, and I focused that mostly on community organizing. And then eventually in 2011, the fall, at my parents', request, I went back to Penn State to start my sophomore year. And literally like 3 days after getting back to Penn State, I checked my email, and I was on this Burning Man newsletter just so I could learn about it and look at pictures and get inspired. I get the newsletter. It says, Burning Man, 1 week away. And I'm like, man, that would be so cool to go there. And then later that day, I was like doing meditation. I had this vision of basically doing a peaceful gathering of hands at Burning Man. Like, what if we had a circle of people joining hands around this main statue of this man that they build that's like 150 feet tall? I was like, man, that would be so cool. I was like, you know what? I only live once. Let's just try to freaking make this happen. So I just go on Facebook and I'm like, hey, world, I want to go to Burning Man. If you've been inspired by my journey, at this point I've been making YouTube videos consistently for, a year and a half. All these people from around the world were inspired by my YouTube videos. I was like, hey, if you've been inspired by my journey and you want to help me continue, if you want to donate to my journey to Burning Man, please do. Sure enough, like 5 different people who I'd never met before donated, some $50. One guy from Australia donated like $450 out of the blue. To me, this is like winning the lottery. I was like, oh my God. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to go to Burning Man. I'm going to figure this out. I talked to my friend Charlie, who was on the bike trip with me. He was like, I have a Greyhound ticket to go to California that I've just been sitting on. I haven't used it. You could have that. So I was like, let's do it. So I'm like, all right, I don't have to buy a plane ticket. I could take a Greyhound to across America. And then I'm like, I just need to find a ticket to Burning Man because it's very rare that there's any for sale a week before. So I post on Facebook. I'm like, does anyone by any chance have a ticket to Burning Man? My one random friend hits me up. He's like, dude, I think I know someone selling a ticket. Let me check in with them. He messages me back. He's like, you're never going to guess who's selling this ticket. His name is Dennis McKenna, and he's a famous philosopher and ethnobotanist. Apparently, he was in the Amazon rainforest and couldn't figure it out to make the trip. So I literally bought a Burning Man ticket from this guy that I looked up to, who's the brother of Terrence McKenna, who's also a famous philosopher. And I was just like, this is too good to be true. But I did it, and I got the ticket. I took a 3-day Greyhound bus across America, which was just crazy, and hitchhiked from the station to Joshua Tree, where I met with this woman who was going to take me to the airport, where I had to meet my friend who was selling me the ticket. So like all these steps had to align. Long story short, I make it to Burning Man, but the woman in Joshua Tree who had all my gear, there's no cell reception at Burning Man. So I get to this desert. I only know like 3 people there, and I don't have any gear. I literally just have a tiny little backpack. You're supposed to bring all your water, all your food, all your clothes for a week, and all I had was this tiny backpack. But finally I got there, and I met with my friends at their camp, who had originally been the people that inspired me to go. And I'm like, hey guys, I don't have any gear. And they're like, don't worry, we'll take care of you. It's your first time. Like, this is what Burning Man's all about. It's about gifting. It's about, community. There's no money exchange the whole festival. You're supposed to just bring everything. But it's all about this gift economy and, self-reliance, which I had to rely on others, but that's part of self-reliance, relying on community. So sure enough, they gave me a tent to stay in, all these different miracles lined up for me, and I just got to explore this incredible festival for a week in the desert. And I did make some YouTube videos there, which still exist. I stayed up for like 25 hours the first day, and it's just an incredible alternate reality. I mean, there is a shadow side to it. It's very wasteful in the sense of resources, but I will say that it is such a profound, life-changing experience that I think there is a greater purpose for it. It's not just total debauchery, but it's like an entire city of itself. So you have the people that just want to, do vodka shots 24/7 for a week, but then you also have like the most incredible spiritual workshops and all these different, enlightening things. So it's literally like an entire city. There's all different buffet options, and it's pretty remarkable. So we did end up doing a circle of hands around around the man. Me and one other friend, just 2 of us, somehow got a megaphone, and I ran around. We were like, "Hey, we're creating a circle around the man." And we got about like 100 or so people to do it, and I did film it, so it is on YouTube. And it was pretty surreal to be able to fulfill that vision that I literally got a week beforehand. Yeah. And so I ended up going back the subsequent 2 years, so 2011, 2012, 2013. And every single time was just like an alternate reality.
Yeah. So you did do something there too, right? You were reading poetry, or
Yeah, so
how'd that come about?
sure, yeah. So the first time I went, I think I might have performed once. They have an open mic at this place called Center Camp, which is right at the center of everything. So the first time I went, I can't remember. I think I might have performed there once. I learned about the open mic. But when I went back in 2012, it was in the middle of what I called the Flowetry and Gift Circle tour.
Mm-hmm.
So I also do slam poetry or flowetry, which is like a performance sort of poetry. And interestingly enough, in 2011, the way that I first got out to California was that these people found some of my YouTube videos doing this slam poetry, and they were like, we got to meet this guy. We got to get him to our event. So they paid for me to come to their festival in California and perform.
Mm-hmm.
And they were the ones that invited me to Burning Man to camp with them.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I performed this spoken word slam poetry. I created a whole tour for myself. I did a fundraising campaign and did all these performances around the West Coast. And so Burning Man was in the midst of all that. And so I was a part of a group called Red Lightning, which is a theme camp at Burning Man. And so I got to perform right after Paul Stamets spoke, who some of you have probably heard of Paul Stamets. He's like the medicinal mushroom expert.
Yeah.
So anyways, I got to perform there, and then I performed pretty much every day at this place called Center Camp, and got to meet so many amazing people. In fact, some people that only knew me from YouTube found me at Center Camp and were like, hey. And my nickname in those days was Philosophical. Philosophical, yeah. So yeah, I got to be a part of that gift culture and gift my performance art to the community, and that was really cool. And yeah, I have a zillion more stories. I don't know how much time we have.
Well, I can recommend Kevin's YouTube videos, and it was interesting to me to find that once I plugged you into YouTube, your name, that they had all of your TikTok lined up in a row, so that if the thing about TikTok is it's a rabbit hole. I mean, you get on there and you I don't know, you can just get lost totally.
Yes.
But it is fun to follow you because it is fun. You're just fun.
Yeah.
You know, it's that high energy, and you've got a story for everything. In fact, sacredstoryweavers.net is where you'll find Kevin.
Yes.
My website will have a link to sacredstories.net, as well as links to some of the other work that you've done. I love your slam poetry, especially the one that's done on that roof while people are eating dinner. And I don't know what restaurant that is. Do you recall? I don't know. It's
on a rooftop.
It's a rooftop. I think it's in Pittsburgh, a Pittsburgh rooftop.
Are you sure it's not the one about the tree one, or?
But
is it? Do you know if it's more recent or an older one?
I think it was an older one.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Honestly, I've done so many, I can't quite remember. I'm not sure which. I know the one that I'm thinking of is called I Am a Tree, and that was in Miami, and that was definitely on a rooftop. I'm sure some people were probably eating. There was about 100 people there. That was a recent performance, and I edited the video myself, putting all these cool footage of ancient trees together, because it's all about speaking from the perspective of a tree. So that one's on a rooftop. I'm not quite sure which one you're talking about. Okay,
Yeah, I've
cool.
seen that one too. Okay, we're about finished here. So at the end of every podcast that I do ask the guest to leave our audience with some words of wisdom. And I think I've prepared you for this. So this is your moment. Whatever you'd like to lead the audience with, they're all yours.
All right. Well, I'll look into this camera right here and just say that I have had the blessing and privilege of surviving 3 near-death experiences. And what I've taken from those experiences is to try my best to live every day as if it's going to be my last, and to really show up in each moment and be present and give it my all, but to also live life as if it's my first day on earth, to be like, whoa, look at how all this stuff works. Like yesterday I was looking at a plane, I'm like, we're literally flying through the freaking sky. Like if we looked at life with a fresh perspective and just really relished in how miraculous it all is, life would be so much better. But we get stuck in the mundane and these patterns and these loops. And so my intention that I reaffirm to myself as much as I can is to live life like it's my last and as if it's my first.
And that sounds like a great way to live, with an attitude of gratitude. Yeah. I love it. Well, thanks for being with us, Kevin. It's been marvelous. I love the energy. And audience, as you know, this is the time where you get to consider what you've heard, to take what resonates with you to heart, and just discard the rest. Until next time, this has been your spiritual journey.